Well, bearing in mind I already have my seat selected for my flight home tomorrow, and if you can guarantee me safety out of this room, my feeling on scope clauses is that it's a restraint on trade. And you could very easily construct a strong argument saying that I have the right as a pilot to work through my career in one company up to the biggest size of aeroplane. And I am amazed that in Europe that the younger pilots haven't taken that view to their pilot unions and said, cut out this, because we want a career progression. What we are finding, and perhaps it's answering the question obliquely, is that a carrier like Lufthansa has said, we don't want to know about anything smaller than a 70-seat aeroplane. Now, by Lufthansa taking that view, you are creating new opportunities for carriers flying 50-seaters. But the scope clause itself, if I were a young pilot now, I would be saying, come on, this is antediluvian. Let's move on.
Thanks.
But I'm holding you to that guarantee of safety.
Oh, thanks so much, Catherine. But I want to let my other two panelists take a shot at it, if they wish.
I have a slight experience with scope clause negotiations from a prior life or two. And the great thing about being in an alliance is that you don't actually have any airplanes or any labor, and so it's something that you don't need to do every day. However, it might be good to talk about the alliance thing a little bit, just to put it in perspective. For us, there isn't even a mainline and a regional, or a large and small. When you look at kind of what's in the alliance world, we have members, and some of the members have affiliates. Okay, and for example, American Eagle is an affiliate. And what does that mean in terms of what's different about them? Absolutely nothing. They are required to do absolutely everything that American Airlines is required to do, except they don't get to go to the meetings. Okay, if you're a member, you go to the meeting, and if you're an affiliate, you don't. But other than that, in terms of oneworld and its relationship with its members and affiliates, they are the same. And we have affiliates in Hong Kong, and we have affiliates in Vienna that's starting up, and so we have many, many parts of the world. We don't see any difference at all legally or contractually in who flies the airplane or what it is.
Right.
It's kind of a relief almost. Now, to get into it, the politics of scope clauses have driven almost everything about the regional airline business for many years in this country.
Yeah.
They've driven the airplane orders, the technology, the investments of Bombardier, the investments of Embraer, the growth, the shift, all that massive shifting of capacity that we saw. All of that in some way is related to scope clauses. I'm not saying it created demand or anything. It didn't. Passengers create demand, not labor contracts. Right. But it certainly made an impact on what year the growth occurred in, when the jets got ordered, all that sort of thing. It's been hugely important and relevant in this country.
So the alliances are largely indifferent. I mean, it's part of the network.
It's just part of the network for us. We want passengers and their bags to get on at one point and get off on another, and it's the member and affiliate family job to do that, and we're completely, out of the picture when it comes to that.
So Greg, Mike used big term. I think it was restraint of trade or something like that. I like that term.
I'll maybe use a different term. Just three really quick things, since our organization doesn't really take a position on this particular issue. But you've known me long enough to know I'm not going to shut up. But so flexibility and adaptability. That's another way of dealing with the restraint of trade issue. I think airports and everything we do look for as much flexibility and adaptability as we can have. And certainly the regional carriers do the same, as you look through the history that Roger went through and how flexible and adaptable they've had to be, and as you're trying to attract air service and so forth. It's frustrating when you try to do that and you find out you can't do it for some reason that has nothing to do with the economics of the route. It has to do with some other factor, whether it's the scope clause or whether it's a bilateral treaty that doesn't make any sense or is too restrictive or whatever. So it's frustrating. That's point number one. And point number two, of course, is ingrained in the collective bargaining, system that we have here, and as a practical matter, I'm not sure we're going to be able to throw it overboard. And then number three, just sort of an anecdote, one of the early projects I met Bill working on years ago was negotiation at U.S. Air between U.S. Air and the pilots, later some other groups. And what I always remember, Bill, about that was that the pilots at U.S. Air were really worried that their concessions would be used by U.S. Air to buy TWA. And what was behind the worry was that TWA had a scope clause that would really have cut a lot of the U.S. Air pilots out. And the lawyer representing U.S. Air in those negotiations on scope issues was the same guy who wrote the TWA scope clause, representing their pilot. I just thought that was interesting.
Wonder who that was, Bruce.
Yeah.
So, okay, Catherine, I'll bite.
Shocking.
The fact that I don't see it floating to 80 seats, and quite honestly, I don't think that the move to 80 seats really accomplishes anything this time around. I think the line in the sand is 76. I don't see mainlines spending the currency to buy scope relief this time when negotiations are so emotional following the bankruptcy process. I think we can look back to some of the negotiations where scope relief was initially granted, and I think in hindsight, people would say I probably overpaid for scope relief. And I just don't believe at this point in time the industry has the currency to say to pilots, you give me this concession, I can afford to give you this much more in terms of pay, work rules, and benefits. So I just see us kind of staying about where we are today, and United and Continental able to reach an agreement because so much of the United system is being flown with 76-seat and less jets today. So I see them getting there, but I just don't see a lot of relaxation this time around. Another question from the audience.
Good morning. Doug Kirk, Albert Systems, Colesman, Enhanced Flight Vision Systems. I have a question to the panel regarding the Next Generation Initiative and Cesar initiative in Europe. We're very much behind it, very much a supporter, but we're concerned that the two may not be coming together. What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. I guess you've never been asked this question before, Mike.
Cesar and NextGen. Two projects that are running parallel and trying essentially to solve the problems, the same problems. Now, we have some doubts about the way in which the Cesar project is being run as to how it's going to deliver results. You mentioned Cesar in an ERA board meeting, and there is a tendency for eyes to glaze over because we've heard about Cesar for the last 3 or 4 years. Where are the benefits? There's a credibility problem building up with Cesar because it is a long-term problem and it's getting progressively more expensive. Now, I'm sure that the same kind of thing exists on this side of the Atlantic with NextGen. What really concerns me is going back to what you said in your last question about the industry hasn't got money. We are funding on both sides of the Atlantic 2 projects to solve essentially the same problems. And whilst 2 lots of technical and intellectual effort can help us, I really would want to see some assurance that we're not going to solve the same problem with 2 different solutions because we cannot simply afford that. We haven't got the money. The manufacturers certainly aren't going to want to build airplanes that are for Europe or for the United States. You just want something that is off-the-shelf, standard, works anywhere in the world. And I need a lot of convincing about the delivery of these programs on time, about the costs and the benefits. We're being asked to forward fund Cesar, and on most things, you only start paying the full price when the benefits are delivered. I would urge everybody in this room to be saying on NextGen, for goodness sake, make sure you're talking to Cesar, and we're doing it the other side of the pond, saying make sure you're talking to nextgen so that we minimize the aggregate cost of essentially solving the problem of increased capacity, lower environmental burden, and lower operating costs. It's not rocket science.
Thank you.